Good morning. Today on the PIO podcast, we have Barry Furey. He's a public safety consultant. Welcome to the podcast, Barry. Thank you for being on the show.
Pleasure is all mine. Thanks for having me.
So, Barry, you have had a rather impressive career in emergency services with over 50 years in the field. With all that time in public safety communications field, do you have any highlights that you recall?
Well, obviously, over that time, with the amount of activities that goes on in the 911 arena, I have several. The centers that I managed and the telecommunicators who worked for me handled just about every type of incident you could think of, from the crazy to the serious. But I think some of the things that I look at, I guess, are personal successes that essentially helped the community, and that was my focus. Is what we're doing helping the community. For example, I instituted the 911 emergency number in Champaign, Illinois, and that to me was critical because we had the home or main campus of the University of Illinois there, which had 50,000 staff and students. We had people coming from all over America, all over the world, and many of the students who came from other cities and states already had the 911 number, and they were used to it for calling an emergency. And certainly, prior to that, we did the best we could to publish the 10-digit number to access police or fire. But, certainly if you are 19, 20, 21 years old, one of the last things you're going to spend your time on is trying to, okay, let's remember what that 10-digit number is, because let's face it, at that point in time, you have other more interesting things to do, and you essentially figure yourself as bulletproof. So just providing that number, I think, was a significant benefit to that community as a whole.
Okay, great. So, Barry, you have stood at the podium hundreds of times during press conferences and conducting after action briefings. Can you give some lessons learned in your experiences and interacting with the media? And before you answer, I have to walk away from the mic a minute. Go ahead and answer. We'll be good. All right. I'll be
All
right back.
right, it works for me, guys, sir. Uh, Basically, one of the first things I would say in dealing with the media is to make sure the people you are essentially representing know that you're going to have this interaction. I had a wonderful city manager once who told me that he hired me because he knew I knew more about 911 than he did, and the only thing he asked of me was to let him know if something blew up right away, so that when he was first contacted by the press, he could tell them, yes, I'm aware of it, and we're working on it. So, go in prepared, I believe, is the first thing to talk about. You don't know what you're going to expect, but you've got to have at least background information, especially if it's a after action or a question about a call that might have been allegedly mishandled. You need to have as much information as you can to go in. Uh, Kind of before you even go, prepare yourself just like it's a test. All right, what do you think the questions are going to be on this topic? So, I mean, sometimes you can get blindsided by a question that comes deep in the outfield, but you shouldn't get blindsided by a question that you yourself might ask if you were in that position. Hey, why did this happen? Who was involved? What time was it? What are you going to do about it after this? So there's that. Uh, I think you can also, after you've done this a while, you can really start to read the audience. You will know what people in the media out there are the easiest to deal with. You know the ones who work for, and sometimes it's just a particular station who wants to put a spin on that topic. I knew a reporter whose brother had been shot by the police. That person
Mm.
did not come to the party with an unbiased opinion, regardless of, oh, the media is supposed to be unbiased. Yeah, that people didn't. So I think it's obviously know who's who, and don't make promises that you can't keep. If you are going to have a follow up, which in many cases is necessary, especially on an evolving incident, put a reasonable time on that promise, or don't say we're going to do our first follow up in 30 minutes. Well, what have you actually gained in that 30 minutes that's
Hmm.
worth bringing to the table? Don't meet. I guess the other thing is, don't meet just for the sense of meeting. And the PIO in today's environment has got the disadvantage of social media getting the message out first. And it does not necessarily mean it's the correct message. And it certainly doesn't mean it's a singular message. I have seen videos of the incident at the IRS office in Texas where a disgruntled taxpayer crashed a private plane into that building.
I
And the
recall this.
image
Yeah.
of it, yeah, and the images is a crowd outside, and half of the people are on their cell phones. Well, are they calling 911? No. Obviously, they're taking videos and they're live streaming it to wherever, to YouTube, to their friend, to somebody halfway across the country. And the second and third and 150th party pieces of information start going out. And, that's one of the real challenges of being a PIO today, is not only getting out your side of the story, or the true story as it may be, and competing with all these half truths that are out there, and sometimes are well established before you can even get on the air, so to speak.
So this next question kind of falls right into that. You co-chaired a national committee that identified best practices on how 911 centers should utilize social media. Frequently, the role of the PIO or I should say, the role of putting out notifications on social media falls to the PIO or the PAO, but they don't always get the real information to keep the community informed because they're either two tiers beyond where they need to be, or they're still not there yet and they're not getting the information quick enough. Can you expand on why it's important for 911 centers to use social media?
Yeah, there's actually, I would say, two different major reasons. One, to start off with, is we'll call it reputation management, and that takes crosses some a variety of topics. These days, with the shortage of telecommunicators, it's important to use social media as a recruiting tool. In between times, it's really important to let the public know just exactly who you are and what you're doing. And when you get involved in social media in that regard, it's also extremely critical to keep your product fresh. If you use social media, for example, to post, oh, we handled 10,000 calls this month, and just let people know what's going on in general, you've got to keep it fresh. If you've got a page, um, and you want people to come there to look for information, people have got to find information there or they stop coming. If you use it as a platform to post your stats, etc., and you haven't posted in 7 months, well, they're going to go somewhere else for that information. But in terms of public information and information management, uh, you've got to go with the times. And in 911, we have forever being playing a game of catch up with electronic and social developments in that we came along and then all of a sudden, hey, there are cell phones. Well, that's something we didn't know about. We had to deal with that technically. There's voice over IP. We got to deal with that now. And now there's social media. And there are so many forms of social media, it's almost impossible to keep up with all the platforms. And then you've got, what age group uses what and who you're going to use to reach the senior population. So, it's important, number one, just during day-to-day operations to keep track of what's happening. I think New York City during the hurricane a couple of years ago had one person doing it, and they got stuck in that position for, I don't know, 20 hours, 24 hours, whatever. But just trying to keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the community. And that also, unfortunately, includes emergent situations. I received more than one email, believe it or not, when I was director over the weekend when I wasn't even on duty. That I just was in the habit of checking my email of somebody reporting a crime. That, and I mean that's just on email, and so many people will post on these neighborhood pages about crimes that happened, and some of them are in progress. And somebody will finally say, well, "Did you call the police?" Oh, no, no, no. Well, why didn't you? So I mean, that's number one, to get a finger on the pulse of what's happening, and number two, to try to get critical information out to the public, and whether that is uh, don't go to this area because there's a big fire and we don't want
Mhm.
traffic and crowds to be more of a problem, to all right, we're going to be testing our tornado sirens, or there is an actual weather event to take cover. So I mean, it's invaluable in terms of, again, monitoring conditions and trying to get the real message out to the people who really need to hear it.
You brought up a point about getting emails in regards to crimes that are committed. Several law enforcement agencies in the last year, several in the last several months, and then over 2022, have really just stopped taking direct messages or allowing people to post messages on their social media uh, platforms because are reporting crimes there. And most of these platforms in most departments are not manned 24/7, 365. I mean, they're in my very own department. We have a girl that's her job is social media, but she's not there 24/7.
Yeah, that's good. And
So go ahead.
yeah, no. Interestingly enough, one of the recommendations that came from that committee, uh, from APCO, was that agencies post information, or a disclaimer, I should put, on their social media sites, says, "Hey, we're not monitoring this actively. If you have a crime in progress or an emergency, call 911. If it's just something you want to discuss, hey, here's the police administration line that you can call Monday through Friday or whatever to talk about an issue." But yeah, we deemed it because it was seen almost immediately as a problem. That oh, hey, wait a minute, here's a way to get through, and it's
All
not.
right. All right. So, Barry, you wrote a book, 911 Management, 365 Days a Year. What is in the book and why did you write it?
Well, I wrote it because I've been to my degrees in public safety. I've been to a lot of seminars over the years. Some of them very good, some of them not so good. Taken a lot of training, read a lot of the manuals out there, and a lot of what I got exposed to in that regard was, I'll say, theoretical. And not that you should not have a background and a knowledge of why things are done in a certain way, but I felt that I gained more useful information in many cases just from my 50 years of experience having sat there and been through this. And it's kind of like, yeah, all right, this part makes sense, but you're left out. You got A, B, and C, but you forgot D and E, and you can get bitten in the butt by D and E as quick as you can by A, B, C. So that was part of it. Another thing is that we in the 911 industry make a big deal about minimum requirements for telecommunicators and what should the person who's answering that phone and making the initial contact have at least as a basic training. We don't so much do that for the people who are supervising and operating the whole operation. So, are we not as, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And I just felt that, you know, people out there who are aspiring for those jobs, who are new in those jobs, need to know some things that sometimes we even get in our business, we get urban rumors in terms of why something is done some way. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to certify two 911 centers I managed with the CALIA Commission on Law Enforcement Accreditation. And that brought me to a realization of how many things are not written down, how many things are not documented. Why do we do this? Well, Fred told us that's how we do this. Where's Fred? He retired back in 1932. Yeah, okay, great. So, I mean, there are just little things about that people don't even understand about HIPAA and labor laws and things that do apply to a portion of our business, or how to deal with the employee who is what I call the comparison shopper. If they don't get the right answer they want from somebody, they're going to go to a supervisor or somebody else on another shift so they can strengthen their argument by, oh well, yeah, Sue on that shift, she said it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot of things like that that aren't in textbooks.
Right. Okay, so you wrote a blog post titled "Never Mind Negligent Retention. How about negligent attention?" And no one wants bad news, and we always assume since nobody is complaining we're doing things right. But if we're doing them right, the public doesn't know about it, right? It's typically
Yeah,
the way it happens. So expand on why it's important to highlight what our 911 centers do daily.
yeah. I will start this conversation off, which kind of the seed for this. I have, and not that you shouldn't do things right, but I have always told anytime a rookie class came in that talk to people professionally, politely. Over the years, I have received more complaints from citizens who did not like what they perceived to be the attitude of the call taker than they did about how the call was technically handled. Because most people who are calling 911, you know, they're not having a good day. And no, it may not be the biggest emergency in the world, and frankly, most of the time it's not. But we focus so much on policy and procedure, which is all needed. But we're a customer service industry. We really really are, and we serve as the gateway between the public and public safety. And in essence, we are to many people the face of the agency that they are calling. Never mind that in most of today's 911 centers uh, are becoming independent, that they are independent entities. They are not under the police, they're not under the fire. A lot of them still are, but in these independent centers, you may be answering for 30 or 40 different agencies. Yet to the caller, all they know is, oh, I called Jonesville Police Department and somebody, I didn't like the way they talked to me. So I mean that's part of, I think, what the general public probably doesn't recognize as much as we think they do, is that they are not talking in most instances to that agency. They're talking to a person who works for a communication center. That also that we are not the person who's going to come out and take care of their complaint. I more than often said, "Hey, I need you to come out here." Well, okay, well, maybe not you personally, but so yeah. I mean, there's a real misconception of 911 itself as an entity. I mean, when somebody asked me once, "What do you do for a living?" I said, well, okay, I'm managing 911 center. Their response was, "Gee, I didn't realize, anybody did that." And I was just kind of like, "Well, how do you think it happens? It's not just this organic thing that occurs, but yeah, it's a separate entity that is, trying to make that connection."
Right, right. So it's interesting that you brought up the thing about how you say things can impact more than what you actually physically do.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of the commanders in my department the other day, and he was discussing about he got moved into a new division, and he was saying that I'm trying to teach these guys on watching some of the language that they use, because that language is what most people remember, as opposed to the experience of what the officer did actually on the street. And that language will be the very thing that will get the officer in trouble, regardless if what they were called there for was taken care of and was positively handled and resolved, versus they not use that language and the person would have probably never called, simply because of the language that they were mistreated, or they felt that they were mistreated. So yeah, that
Exactly.
words do matter, and that's important. All right, Barry. Lastly, is there a question I should have asked, and how would you have answered it?
The question that you should have asked is, how does one become a PIO, and what training or skills are necessary for that function? And my answer would be, sometimes one becomes a PIO by necessity. There are a number of small agencies that likely do not have a dedicated PIO or even a full time PIO, and that task falls to whoever the poor sucker is that answers the phone at the time. So, in a sense, the 911 centers, many of them serve as ad hoc PIOs for departments that don't have one, or are so small that their PIO now is at the end of the hose on. It's going to take a while before he or she is available. And in terms of how do you prepare? It's a lot of people skills and common sense. And
Yep,
so some of
I'll
that
agree
can
with
be
you on that.
taught, and again, some of it comes from experience.
So a lot of it is just getting out there and having conversations with people and learning how to talk. I think
Yeah.
that's so important. That is a thing that is very tough in the new generation of young people today, because they're so used to talking to their electronic devices versus having a face to face conversation. And whenever I do a media brief, or when I'm talking to the media about an incident, I'm talking through the camera to a person sitting in front of their
Yeah.
TV. I'm not talking to the reporter. They're a conduit. And I think a lot of people, they think, oh, I can say anything I want. Young people, they can say anything they want on their electric device, their electronic device, their phone, or whatever it might be, and there's no consequence for it. And
Yeah.
there can be, and there's also no way to gauge emotion. It's very hard to gauge emotion on a cell phone. I mean, unless of course it's all caps, and then they're screaming at you. But again, it's just we have to teach young people how to communicate face to face, one on one first, before they could even want to even do the job of being a public information officer, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right, Barry. So we're gonna jump into some rapid fire questions, and then we'll go and we'll wrap it up here. You ready?
Sure.
Texting or talking?
Talking, basically for the same vision you had with regard to using your electronic device versus face-to-face communications. You can't get the nuances of emotion through text.
Right. Coffee or tea?
Tea,
Adult.
because
Go ahead.
no, I was going to say tea because I worked too many midnight shifts early in my career and drank too much 911 center, police station, fire station coffee.
Stuff will just burn a hole through your
Oh
stomach.
God, yes.
Adult drink of choice.
Vodka and tonic with a twist.
What would be a superpower if you could have one?
Hey, why not invincibility? I mean, that would take care of all the other superpowers combined.
Do you have a pet?
No, I would like one, but my son is deathly allergic to dogs, so we don't have any fur-bearing animals in the house.
Gotcha. Is there a book or an author that had an influence on your life?
Actually, my mom is an author who had an influence in my life. She used to write stories for children's magazines like Highlight for Children.
I remember that. I used to get that all the time. Oh, I remember that. Yeah. Ask permission or beg for forgiveness?
Depends on the situation. I would say most of the time, ask for forgiveness, get the job done. But if you're going to spend $1 million of your department's funds, probably asking permission first is a good idea.
It's kind of situational, but I want to say most PIOs are gonna beg for forgiveness.
Yeah.
If you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would you choose?
Helen Keller.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I could see that.
Well,
that would be.
I mean, there would be the communications issues to deal with, but also I can't think of anybody who would have stories to tell that were so 180 degrees opposed to the life I've lived.
Right. I could see that. Yeah. All right. Very final thoughts. What key points would you like the listeners to take from the interview today?
Well, one real key point would be, God, it's an old saying, and that's consider the source. Back when people used to, I heard a rumor about Fred or something like that. Hey, wait a minute, who'd you hear it from? What knowledge did they have of the situation? Why did they tell you? Why is it important? Why now? Apply those same filters to every piece of information you take in, especially when it comes to your own personal safety and when it comes to ongoing incidents in your community. Just consider where that information came from.
Excellent. Anything you'd like to add?
I would just like to thank you for being here. I would like people to consider, people who are not in public safety right now, to consider looking for a job in public safety. There is a lot of need out there. There are a lot of vacancies out there. And if you've got the inclination to do some good in your life, it's a great place to be.
It's interesting. We're hiring. We're down. I think we're down 72 right now, officers. But we could use 20 or so combined ERTs, which are our first level call takers in our dispatch center. And then, of course, our dispatchers that would be on the 911 call, actually dispatching people out. So, it's interesting. Public safety, a lot of hiring going on, a lot of money being thrown around, benefits, pension, all that other fun stuff. And I think people forget about that. So thank you for bringing that up.
You're
Barry,
welcome.
how could people best reach you if they want to connect or follow up?
I guess the two quickest and best ways would be to my website, which is barryfurey.com, BARRYFUREY.com, or a direct email, barryfurey@yahoo.com.
And I will add all that into the show notes. Barry, thank you for coming on the show.
You are welcome, sir. Thank you for having me. You have a safe day.
And that was Barry Furey.